Hey everyone, how's it going? Gamer Geek here, and today we'll be talking about my own personal game project. I saw in the comments of my last video somebody was asking about where I'm at with development, so I thought I'd make a quick update video on what's going on with the project. So to start off, a lot has changed. My original mobile game idea, the first-person sci-fi shooter, went through a lot of changes. I kept wanting to add more and more to the game, eventually making it difficult to package and run on a phone for testing. Textures wouldn't load properly, game mechanics wouldn't function correctly, and the game would sometimes stall when running on a phone for testing. On PC it was fine, only when porting it to my phone did I experience issues. So after some unsuccessful attempts to make it functional, I realized that the game had just become too big for a phone to handle. The high resolution textures, various in-game mechanics, and detailed particle systems needed to either be cut or reduced, or the game needed to move away from mobile. Not wanting to compromise the game just to pass it off as playable, I decided to make the switch and repurposed it as a PC game instead of mobile. With that switch, the game has been testing perfectly, and I'm happy with how development is going with it. I don't want to waste my efforts with the mobile game development though, so I decided to develop a simpler game as a mobile title alongside the PC game. That mobile game is what we'll be talking about today, and over the course of several upcoming videos as I document the process of me developing and finalizing the game. For this video, we'll be talking about detail rendering our environment. So as you can see in the video, I started off by making some basic designs for my buildings that will eventually populate my game. I divided the buildings up into 3 sections, the main portion, lower portion, and detail portion, so that in-game I can have the buildings pieced together or have a blueprint actor that randomizes each section to get some variety in the buildings without me having to design or render each one. For the actual modeling of each building, I kept it simple. Based the look on like a downtown office building design just to make it some simple shapes with a ton of windows and minor detailing if any. I didn't focus on making detailed materials in Blender because material nodes can't be exported out, so I'll be waiting until I import into Unreal Engine 4 to create the materials for each building. So you may be wondering what this new mobile game is about. Well, I decided to keep all aspects of the game simple and make it run easily on a phone so the story isn't too detailed, yet. In this game, you take control of a protagonist with the ability to teleport short distances. You take orders from some unknown government-style organization that has you assassinate high-profile targets throughout your city. Each target will have some protection, obviously, so the name of the game is Stealth. You have to get to your target and take them out before you're seen, otherwise the target can't be assassinated and his crew opens fire. Be careful though and watch your footing, as you could end up falling off and splatting on the street below. I'm planning on there being 30 targets for you to go up against, as well as a separate game mode for an endless challenge. For this video, I'll be showing the modeling and importing of 2 buildings, but know I'll likely be making at least 6 to make good use of the randomizing blueprint I mentioned earlier. Something to keep in mind for anyone out there designing a game themselves, notice how the lower portions of my buildings have little detailing. This is because from the player's perspective, it'll be set high up and from a distance, so they'll never notice the lack of detail. Knowing this trick can really save you some time on modeling because you'll be able to skip out on some work when you realize that you don't have to detail everything when your player can't even see it. So after finishing the work on the first building, unwrapping the UVs and adding the solidify modifier, I started work on the second building. I kept the first building in the viewport while I was working on sizing the second building because I wanted to make sure that they weren't dramatically different in terms of heights. Remember, the player is supposed to jump from rooftop to rooftop and is meant to only teleport short distances, so I want to make sure that every rooftop is actually accessible to the player, so there won't be any dramatically taller buildings than the rest of the ones in the environment. The player is meant to be able to access pretty much every rooftop with the exception of the out of bounds kind of scenery that you're going to see in the backgrounds of each level, but there isn't going to be any 1 or 2 buildings in each level that are going to be completely inaccessible just given how tall they are compared to all the other buildings. I want the player to have some variety, but not enough in the building scenery that there's places that you just can't go. So as you can see, the design of the second building is very different than the first one. It's obviously a little bit taller, it's a little bit wider, it's also got a different material to it, and this is very important to realize that I wanted all the buildings to look dramatically different from each other because I don't want the player to get bored while they're in game seeing the same building laid out in front of them over and over and over again for 30 levels. I want this to look like a real city where there's a variety of buildings with different materials, different styles of building, office buildings, residential areas. This has to look interesting to the player as they play, and my idea is that it's going to look somewhat realistic. Everything from the street below to how the neighborhoods are laid out. I want this to be interesting to the players so there's a difference in each level, noticeably, so that they're not bored as they get through thinking they're playing the same level over and over and over again because there's no variety. So with that, the idea of having a good amount of variety in the level, I want to talk about the backgrounds of each scenery, the places out of bounds that the player won't actually be able to reach, but still will be able to see, the things that really fill out the scenery of each level. I want to add a good couple of buildings that you might not see in the actual playable parts of the level, just something to add even more variety. Yes, you won't actually be able to jump onto the buildings or teleport to them necessarily, but I do want them there to add even more variety. As you look out throughout the backgrounds of each level, you'll see a variety of buildings. That's where you'll see buildings that are maybe too tall for the player to actually reach because they're not even supposed to go over there. But I want to add a good variety to each scene so that the player can have something to look out at and get a nice visual aspect to this game. So this is my level setup in Unreal Engine. Pretty basic nighttime look, some nice fog and cloud effects to give it a good design. So we're going to import the first building I modeled into the game and just test the size of the model to get a good idea of what we're working with. I went ahead and made each building a blueprint so that I could add things to the building later, like lights or other effects. It also makes it easier dragging them on and resizing them so I don't have to worry about making sure all the portions are even and sit flush with each other. Starting off, the building looked a little too big, so I shrunk it down, but then realized after placing the player's start inside the level that it was actually a little too small, so I had to resize it up and actually make it a bit wider. Playtesting it for the first time, I actually like the look of this building. Obviously it doesn't have any textures yet, it's not very detailed, but I do like how it turned out. It still is a bit thin to me and I really do need to size it up to make it a bit wider. You need to have more space to walk on. It is a building after all, so it should be much larger than the character, but overall I like how it looks and I like the direction it's headed in. The detailing turned out nice. Obviously with some textures on the wall instead of flat colors, it's going to look really good. Alright, so after playtesting the game, I saw that the building was a little too thin, so I'm going to resize it. I don't want to stretch it out too wide because as you can see, it's going to stretch the windows out. It's going to look a little off if I do that, so I got to make sure that we complement the width with the height. I want to make sure that the building is actually big enough that people can fit inside of it so that it doesn't look really off to the player, because even though their perspective is going to be forced at a certain angle, it still would look really weird if the windows were stretched super wide and would actually drag the textures out a lot. So as you can see in the materials section, I took away the flat color, I added a concrete texture sample and a concrete normal map. If you don't know how to make these yourself, you can go online, find tons of free resources for them. There's tons of tutorials on how to make them. Really, they add a lot of good detail to your materials. I also added a constant to the roughness to make sure we're not reflecting any light. I don't want a metallic surface for this building at all. So I really like how the material turned out for this building. I added a texture coordinate node to tile the material so that it would actually fit better to the building. As you can see now, I'm going to be doing the window texture and the detailing texture. I put a nice steel texture to the detailing. I think it looks really cool. Overall, this building turned out really nice. The detailing and materials turned out perfectly. I really like how it looks. So now we have to play test the game and really see how the materials look when we're in the middle of the game. So as you can see in this playtest, the roof still doesn't have a material to it yet. I haven't done a texture for it. Still working on what I want to put on the rooftop that you'll be running around on. But as you can see for the rest of the building, it actually looks really good. Even in game for the playtest, it does look really detailed. I like how the concrete looks on the wall. I like how the steel looks for the detailing. The windows even look really good. Overall, the size and materials of this building turned out really nicely. I think this is a really good start to detailing our environment, and I'm really looking forward to doing more buildings for this game and really fleshing out all the details. So now it's time to import the second building. Set up the materials just like we did with this one, and we'll see how it turns out. So the second building's in and it looks amazing. I love the brick texture. I love how it turned out with the materials, and I think it looks just as good as the first building. Adds some nice variety too with the difference in colors. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you like the designs of these buildings? Do you hate them? Do you love the materials and the textures? Do they need improvement? Obviously these aren't perfect yet. I have a lot of adjusting to do with these, resizing and things like that. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. I hope you're excited for this game just as much as I am. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.